Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. My name is Ted Brodheim. I'm the Global CIO Advisor for Education at Zoom, and I'm thrilled to be here today with this awesome group of panelists. We're going to discuss the world of changing work in school and how the decisions that a company makes on the future of hybrid work resemble or differ from decisions being made by schools. How do they relate, connect, or affect each other? We've got a great group of panelists that span that entire realm, and I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jen Buchanan. I lead learning and development for the field at Sam's Club, so I'm responsible for all the learning, development, and upskilling of our 100,000 associates at our 600 club locations.
Wow. I'm Paul LeBlanc, president of Southern New Hampshire University.
I'm Julie Greenwood. I'm the Vice Dean for Educational Initiatives at ASU, and I'm responsible for the learning and success of all of our online students.
I'm David Miyashiro, Superintendent for the Cajon Valley School District, about 15 minutes east of here.
Well, thank you all. David, I think I'm going to throw the first question at you because you got here last. I think that's only fair. As you think about the process of returning everyone to school, what are some of the things that you felt you had to do differently, or some of the things that you really wanted to do differently?
One of the things that we did exceptionally better than we did prior to the pandemic was listen and really understand what the wants and needs of our employees are, but also the parents and the students that we serve. And I think that if there's one thing that we'll keep as normal is asking and listening and responding thoughtfully.
Jennifer, you want to give your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I guess a little bit of a different lens on that was in the field we didn't have a return to work, right, because the clubs and stores remained open. But I think, during the pandemic, we realized that we needed to think about learning and development for frontline associates very, very differently. We had started to kind of make this move towards learning in the flow of work, but what really became apparent and evident during the pandemic was we needed to give associates, frontline associates specifically, the ability to grow and learn simply by just doing their job so that they didn't need to be able to leave the Sam's location to pursue additional growth.
Paul?
It's always been interesting to me that the Silicon Valley companies that enable us to have lives in virtual spaces do everything they can to have all their employees in one place. So in a similar fashion, we have a massive online enrollment, and all of our employees, for the most part, we're in this big mill complex, hundreds of thousands of square feet in Manchester, New Hampshire. So for us, of course, we went fully remote, and that was the big shift. So we were growing our enrollment as so many online institutions and organizations did in year one of the pandemic, like 40,000 more students in 12 months. Had to hire another 1,000 staff people, but to do that onboarding and training and shipping out computers and integrating them into the culture, fully virtual, was really challenging for us. And we've given people an option. Some people have to come back because their jobs can only be done in place, but 64% of our people will not come back. And we're still learning how to make that work well. So from a tools perspective, not a problem. From a stickiness, where our turnover rates are higher, or with people who've been hired during the pandemic, they were never immersed in the milieu of that space and that buzz and energy. So there's some interesting challenges, and I think we're still too much in the middle of it to pretend that we have great answers.
Yeah, so great question. I think at ASU what we saw was it was an advantage to have that infrastructure in the online space that my unit, Ed Plus, kind of oversees, and really we had to come and partner and integrate with campus to actually help bring that and support the faculty in order to quickly bring their courses into what we called a new modality called ASU Sync. And so ASU Sync really combines all modalities into one approach. So students can attend in person, they could attend, and that would be synchronous in person, synchronous online, asynchronous online, and then leverage all of our digital learning tools. And so once again, that worked great during COVID, but we realized that wasn't great for all of our students. And so once again, as we're moving forward, we're leveraging ASU Sync at a more strategic approach. And so we have a variety of programs for which it does work better. And we're starting to experiment, such as with our honors college that we've just launched at ASU, really blending and mixing both online and the traditional campus students into the same learning environments. And so once again, that's really creating this very rich experience for our students, bringing in, kind of that traditional online older student into the mix with some of those more traditional 18-year-old students entering into the campus environments. And so what we're seeing is that benefits and improves the education and learning experience for all of our students.
And how is the faculty responding to that?
It's fascinating because, we never force anyone to go online, but faculty typically resisted or reluctant to move into the online space. When we first launched, when I was at Oregon State and of course at Arizona State. Now, faculty want to teach online. That has really become, for many of our faculty, a modality of choice. And so, once again, it's how do you create that flexibility for everyone within our community to really reach their excellence, their excellence of where they work best.
And Paul, your school is predominantly online. You do have some in person, but
Yeah, we have a small campus, about 4,000 students, and they had, that traditional faculty really struggled with that transition. It was uneven, and as Julie described, we were able to leverage all of the sort of massive infrastructure and expertise, which really accelerated their ability to go back. But if I were to open the aperture, I sit on the board of the American Council of Ed, and so this is, the widest range, whole systems, community colleges, small colleges, et cetera, serve on the board. And it's the faculty who are most reluctant to go back to face-to-face uniformly. So if you take a look at who's fighting mask mandates, or we have to keep the mask on, or I'm not ready to go back in the classroom, the faculty continue to be very reluctant. So online for them has become, I'll take this all day long. Like, I'm not going back in with those germy students. Sorry, I shouldn't call them germy students.
And Jennifer, what did you find that was very different as you were really approaching this, since you had everyone coming in all the time?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit about how we bring the learning closer to work for the associate and really changing our approach there. We have issued handhelds to all of our associates, and we're in the process of doing so and driving all of the learning through those handhelds. But as we really sat back and we've reflected on the learning experience at the club, we were like, okay, well, we're digital at our core, but we're in person when it makes sense from an effectiveness and retention standpoint from learning. So as we kind of made this transition, we decided that it was probably time to start working towards closing our training rooms. You may not know this, but upstairs in the Sam's Club location, there's a training room. There's actually a windowless training room up there where a lot of the traditional training comes through the computer. And we were like, we could do this differently, right? So we set together an objective around closing down those training rooms and really meeting the associate where they were and providing that learning experience in the handheld. And so we're working through that this year. We had 38 closed as of when I flew out here. So we are on our way to that 600 and really providing that experience for our associates that's closer to work.
And how do the employees respond to the new work environment or the new training environment, as it were?
Yeah, they are really, really excited about it. I think it's kind of really neat to see. It's learning happening in the moment, right? It's real time, and associates are soaking that up, and they're talking about it. It's really creating that community of learning or those learning ambassadors within the club. And it also kind of creates that social learning environment because it's giving them the opportunity through our programs to connect with other associates through the fleet, right, and grow and reflect and learn and ask thought-provoking questions and just really kind of open their minds and drive that curiosity. So it's been well received.
That's great. David, I know you really took advantage of the pandemic to make a lot of changes, so go ahead.
Well, so prior to the pandemic, we were a one-to-one district. Every child had a computer for their learning since 2013. And so digital learning and home to school wasn't an issue for us, and we thought, we're going to be fine. 2 weeks into the pandemic, we were having weekly Zoom calls with our PTA presidents and their PTA boards, and the sounds of appreciation quickly turned to sounds of of fear and uncertainty and desperation, children needed to go to school because parents needed to go to work. I used to think that we were in the education industry. We're in the service industry, an essential service for the community funded by tax dollars so that kids can thrive in school in person and so that parents can go to work and the economy can run. Schools should never have shut down. And in April of 2020, we opened our first classroom of 18 students, became 2 classrooms. By June of 2020, we had all 28 of our schools open, and any parent that wanted to send their kids to school, we were there for them. Those that kept their kids home for COVID-related reasons or fears had that option too, but we are an essential service and schools should never have closed.
One of the things we talked about when we met as a group earlier was the whole notion around graduation rates, around certifications, around these different ways of thinking about education and thinking about workforce training. And Jennifer, I was wondering if you could start this off by telling what you told me about using the training for college credit and how that is creating a bridge for folks. And then I'm curious to hear how the rest of you are all thinking about this issue going forward.
Yeah, so about 2 years ago, we reimagined a program that we call our Manager in Training program at the club. And it's a program for high potential team leads who are working towards a career in management. So the program actually used to be a 300-page binder and a 100-page sponsor guide. So like you might not want to be in it. You probably didn't want to sponsor it either because it was 170 pages. So we knew we had to make it a digital journey. But as we were talking about kind of growing that curriculum and what would that experience look like moving forward, we had started a partnership with Guild Education at the time. And we were like, what if we could make this training for college credit? And everyone was like, oh, ha, 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 Jen, you could never make cutting a ribeye for college credit. So I was like, oh, watch me. I was like, actually, you can, right? It's about how you set it up, right? It's about how you write the curriculum. It's about the thought-provoking questions. It's about connecting it to past experiences. It's about the reflective content, right? We can do this. So we rewrote the content, and what it enables an associate to do is they go into a training job code, and through the flow of work, they cross-train across our different work groups in the club, fresh, member, merchandise, and specialty. So not only are they kind of growing in their leadership skills, they're also learning about the different destination roles in the club. So we worked with Guild to articulate it for college credit. And so I was just thinking in my head, if this could just come back for 1 credit, that would be like the coolest thing ever, right? Because there would be that one person who would be 1 credit closer to being done, and this is a tuition-free program, and that would be so amazing. So it started to come back from the different universities. Southern New Hampshire is one of them. And the program was articulated for an entire semester's worth of college credit with 5 universities. And in that moment, we were like, wow, we know we have something really amazing here for our associates. But when I knew that it was amazing, but I didn't realize how much it would change people's lives and how passionately that they would feel about it. So during this process, we had one of our training events was fresh training, and we had the assessors there seeing if we could articulate the training for credit. But we didn't tell any of the associates going through the program at that time that we were doing it because, again, I wasn't sure if I could pull it off. So we kept that to ourselves. So, fast forward 6 months later, pre-COVID, we're all together for our big year beginning meeting, and we kick off our rotation with a video telling everyone in the room that, hey, remember that training you went to about 6 months ago? You're getting college credit for that training. People in the room started crying. I had goosebumps like on my skin immediately. It inspired so much hope, right? To hear folks that maybe thought potentially college was never an option for them or not something that they could do, and it's like, hey, not only can you do it, you actually already did it. So let's keep on going. This is amazing for you. So just in seeing that journey and inspiring that hope, and then really enabling those associates not just to upskill at work, but get college credit, they can grow their career within the larger Walmart enterprise, or they can grow their career outside the company, but it just also, really contributes to their overall economic mobility as well.
Well, thank you for that. It's a really great story. Julie, do you want to comment about that and some of the things that you're doing at ASU in that space?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we still prioritize our degree programs. We still feel it's very much value added. Certainly, we can do a better job at supporting our students, particularly supporting our underserved and underrepresented students in degree programs, particularly in STEM. But we also realize that doesn't work for all learners. And we also realize that once you have a degree, you're not done learning. So we've really been focusing more and more on lifelong learning. ASU has recently launched what we call the Learning Enterprise. So we've dedicated an entire enterprise to non-degree learning and programs. And in many cases, such as our Earned Admission program, this is a program, ASU never turns away a student. So if a student doesn't meet an admissions requirement, we offer them access through an earned admissions program. And so this is a program where students can go in and they have low-cost access to high-quality course with low facilitation, with maximal flexibility and personalization. And so once again, if a student completes that pathway, they then are guaranteed admission into ASU Online. And so once again, that really was the foundation and the thinking behind the Learning Enterprise. And then how do you take that to certificates, to continuing and professional education? How do we support our graduates as they're entering the workforce? How do we support individuals who are making late life career changes, or individuals who just want to learn? ASU has opened up a retirement community on our campus. And so once again, there are senior learners. We know that learning late in your life can actually help prevent Alzheimer's disease. So once again, we really want to support individuals across their entire lifespan through learning. And in addition to that, that Learning Enterprise is now expanding back in through K through 12. And so we now have Prep Digital. And so we're really going all the way from cradle to grave. And once again, helping individuals accomplish what they want to accomplish through learning.
That's great. Now, David, when we were talking on Monday, you mentioned the high school that you're starting. So when you think about these new options that are opening up, how is that going to influence what you're saying to your students and how you're directing them as they move through the high school process?
The vision of our district is happy kids engaged in healthy relationships on a path to gainful employment. I see one now. Jose, raise your hand. Are you speaking today?
Yes, I am.
You met the president of SNHU before I met the president of SNHU.
We're all friends.
Good Lord. Happy?
Yeah.
Healthy relationships?
Yeah.
On a path to gainful employment? It's knowing each child deeply and well, connecting them with their friends, and then showing them what's possible about their future. And I think it's as simple as that. In order to do that, we need to have happy employees engaged in healthy relationships, enjoying their employment. And that's a huge focus for us, too, is a positive culture for work.
And Paul, I know you have lots of thoughts on this topic, so I'll just let you go.
No, I think, when we talk about the kinds of skills mapping for credit, I think we're recognizing that the higher ed ecosystem is changing such that learning happens in lots of places, and we have to be much better at capturing that learning and bringing it in some fashion. So when I think about the sort of rise in micro-credentials, and look, we're still working out the taxonomy of names, et cetera, but it sort of falls in two places, right? So one is, for a lot of people, time is a privilege, and the deferred payout of a 2 and especially a 4-year degree can be pretty extended. So if I can give someone a 6 or 9 month learning experience that takes them from making $15,000 a year to $60,000 a year, and we do this with Kenzie Academy program that does UX design and software engineering, we still want them to get a college degree. Julie's completely right. We don't want a 2-tier system, but it's the old 4 and 40 model is gone. 4 years of university, 40 years of career, like that just seems hopefully right out of date. So now think about instead for someone from an underserved community that doesn't have the luxury of a full degree period of time, get me that first job. Let me work at it for 9 months. I may come out of the ecosystem for a while. I just have to get good at this. Till that supervisor, right? Till Jen sort of pats you on the shoulder and says, "You'd be great as a team lead." You need some other skills now. Like, let's work with you on how we get you there. And that might happen in the workplace. It might happen in an online program. It might happen on a campus. But we've got to think about a learning ecosystem for which degrees are still maybe the most important milestones, but a greater granularity of credentials. And if I were channeling someone like Byron Auguste, he would say, look, we also have to stop requiring degrees for jobs that don't require degrees, and we really need to focus on skills-based hiring because it's deeply inequitable. Who doesn't have degrees, right? So I think there's that. And then on the other end, so this is getting into the workforce. On the other end, we know the half-life of skills are 2, 3, 4 years now. So even if you don't change your job will change out from under you. So we have to build an ecosystem that lets people dip in and get just the amount of learning they need for, it might be 2 days, it might be 2 weeks, it might be 2 months, right? And the ability to assign credit to that. And higher education in its incumbent system as it is today is not very good at that. And we've got to get better. Yeah, and I'm a big believer in competencies as the exchange rate by which we do that. Because employers think about skills and competencies. What can my people do with what they know, right? And when we can start having that same conversation with employers, now we're on common ground.
So let's stick on that theme for a moment. And David, let's start with you from the K-12 side. Talk a little bit about summer camp.
Oh, yeah. So in the summer of 2020, we opened Camp Cajon. And we opened from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And we asked the students what they wanted to do, and parents what they would have their kids get excited about if they get them out of bed. And it was surfing and swimming and hiking and field trips. This is summer of 2020. And sports camps. We did live theater, we did music, mostly the electives types of experiences, and then we sprinkled in literacy and math. And by the end of summer camp, kids said, can school be like this every day? And I think it can. Why not flip the script? And I think ASU Teachers College is showing workforce redesign and different models of building schools, not around the convenience of the adults, but the wants and needs of the community and the kids. And they want to have fun at school.
So Jennifer, how are you rethinking the training within Sam's Club, and how are you rethinking this whole notion of community and, I don't know if I can use the word fun, but the different options and the different things that people can learn and how that's going to influence their careers?
Yeah, so I think, we've kind of moved towards where we can, this idea of cohort-based or community-based learning where associates can, reflect and grow together. One of the other things that I've seen over time is that we, traditionally what we would do is we would put all hourlies in a training course, or we would put all management in a training course. But then what happens is that one group or that one cohort comes back with all these new ideas and thoughts and things they want to implement, but if the management isn't on board or hasn't gotten those new ideas too, it's very hard to put those new things in place. So we've really taken a top-down meets bottoms-up approach to really having these kind of heterogeneous cohorts when we do learning, thinking about how we build our learning programs almost like little Lego blocks that click together throughout the club. And then depending on where you are in your career, you can go through that learning program and gain that foundational knowledge, but then you can go through it again as you promote into that next level of the club, but without it being duplicative in nature. And we do have fun. we do think about learning as fun too, and also just really leaning on technology. One of our tools is a voice responsive digital assistant, and it's called Ask Sam. So if you think of the old way of training of cutting a ribeye, it might be a notebook or a binder that would have drawings of how to cut that ribeye, or someone showing you, right? But in the new world, you ask Sam, how do I cut a ribeye, right? And a micro video pops up with this directions on how to cut that ribeye that the associate can watch. So not only they're getting that right in time, but it's also a much more fun way to receive that training within the digital tool. So that's been really a great way to give the training, and it also just kind of makes us think about kind of that whole training ecosystem that we have, and tagging and meta tagging that content so it can kind of fit into that world where they're able to pull that training at the moment of need.
And Julie, what are some of your thoughts on this notion that we've been sort of going around on of just-in-time learning and just-in-time education?
So certainly very important. I think I would think of it more in terms of personalized learning. And so some of what we're doing, if you look at ASU, look at many universities, we lose many of our students in our math courses, particularly our STEM students, and that's the huge barrier. And so much of that is, if you think about a transfer student who hasn't taken math in over a decade, and they're coming back to school, and maybe they enter in at pre-calculus, but they don't remember what they were taught 10 years ago. So we're working to build adaptive and personalized learning systems. So once again, a student can enter into that course, and then based on what they're coming into that course with, their assets, their knowledge and understanding, they can enter into that curriculum. And if there's something that they're missing, we have a system that has that curriculum mapped all the way across math from kindergarten through calculus. And it can say, oh, okay, they did not understand this linear function, so we're now going to take them back 2 years to cover the basic fundamental skills that will allow them to complete those tasks and then move on in the course. And so all of that is happening in real time. Each student's path through each course is different. And then once again, we're doing that across the entire math curriculum. We've done it across the entire biological sciences curriculum. And then if you really want to talk about fun, what we're doing is those students get to go have their labs in an alien zoo out in space. So how can it get more fun than that? And then once again, the students go through these virtual reality experiences, which are basically Hollywood quality. And then you take that, and then you gather your data in the alien zoo, and then you go back to that laboratory group, and you analyze that data together. And you're still learning the same fundamental concepts that you would be learning in a traditional lab. You're just doing it more efficiently, and it's a lot more fun. And so once again, those are the types of experiences. And then, once again, we still want students to apply what they're learning into real-life situations. So we're bringing undergraduate research. Typically you think of that only being accessible to students in campus-based programs. We're bringing that into the online space at scale. And so once again, any student anywhere in the world can do genomics research with our faculty and apply what they're learning in their classrooms. And once again, take that out into their career.
That's fantastic. Have you been able to come up with any data on how it's impacting retention or student satisfaction or faculty opinions on mastery?
Oh, absolutely. So just take some of our math work. We've been integrating not only adaptive and personalized learning into those courses, but community learning. And so one of our partners, Inscribe, has a platform that we can integrate into the classroom that allows peer-peer interaction, peer TA, peer instructor, every kind of interaction that you can imagine within that classroom. So we implemented this in college algebra. We're seeing increases in pass rates anywhere from 5 to 14% in those courses just over the last year and a half. We're also doing that in our English composition courses, and really just in our first iteration of that, we're seeing pass rates go up anywhere from 5 to 10%. And so once again, we're using that data, we're using learning engineering approaches to then take and iterate and improve those classroom experiences over time. And then we're applying those same techniques across the entire student journey, all the way from admissions, financial aid, through the classroom, all the way through graduation and beyond.
That's great. Paul, are you doing similar things?
We're actually, the thing that we're spending a lot of time on now is grappling with what is the impact of the pandemic on the way our students want to access their learning. So we tend to focus on, a 30-year-old who's working, got a couple of kids, trying now to sort of fit in an education. And we've been fiercely dedicated to asynchronous because we have a lot of people who don't even know what their schedule will be next week, right? So they need the flexibility that comes with an asynchronous model in our case. But now what we're seeing with the pandemic is like everyone's used to synchronous video sessions or grandpa. And now should we include more video? And do we need more synchronous options? Legacy of our learning model has been a lot of publisher content, and it's a little bit more text heavy. We live in a world of podcasts now, and how do we think about that? And everyone's, of course, talking about mobile first. So I think we're still trying to sort out all of that. But I will say that I'm spending a lot of time talking to people, both sociologists and psychologists, about this. Among the impacts of the pandemic, which you all know, is that mental health issues are off the charts across the country, but certainly in higher education today. And how do we start to build community and deal with trauma? Like, we've done trauma-informed counseling training for all of our advisors, because there are a lot of people walking around with trauma at this moment, right? And how do we think about that? So for us, I interviewed Matt Steinfeld, a psychologist at Yale, about this, but he would argue that, the way we sort of move and address this is through relationship. And how you do relationship at scale is a really complicated question, because it's hard, right? It's the relationship part is the most expensive part of what we do. And what relationships at what moments and in what ways at a time when there's evidence that, at least in American society and culture, people are less willing to commit to sustained relationship. And it's a strange thing. There's a great piece by Stephen Botticelli, who's a psychotherapist. This is a crisis in counseling. Because the idea that now the notion is, hey, I'm willing to sign on for a session. It's like, we can't address your issues in one session. You mean you want me to sign, I have to do this multiple sessions? No, I'm in a world of streaming. I go from streaming service to streaming service to streaming service. I doom scroll my Twitter account, right? So the attention span gets really short, and the idea that, are we willing to be in sustained relationship in a world where people feel more isolated and lonely? Sorry, this is a long digression. But I do think there's this very interesting thing that's happening, and we're in the middle of a cultural shift, and we won't go back to normal, right? If you've read Pale Rider, which is a wonderful 2016 book about the Spanish epidemic, the epidemic of 1918, we know it will all change, but we're so in the middle of it. And I do think that we only heal through relationship. I'm sort of convinced of that. But I'm really struggling with is, how do we build relationship in to our learning model? It's been critical to our model up to date, but our student behaviors are changing now. And how do they want relationship, I think, is one of those questions we have to unpack and understand. So I look at the Engagely platform, for example. It's a fairly new learning platform. They're really building community and relationship and peer-to-peer now much more consciously. I think they're onto the kinds of things we need to be doing. I don't know if it's the right solution, but it's the kind of thing we need to be looking at.
Well, I could talk about this for about another 2 hours myself, but I want to leave a little bit of time for questions for the audience. But maybe, Jennifer, any thoughts on summing up, or any things you're thinking about doing next that you want to share?
Well, what goes in my alien zoo? That I'm definitely thinking about doing. I'm imagining that in my mind right now. No, I think there was a point that Paul hit on earlier with kind of the employer and higher ed kind of figuring out what's that singular thread that runs from skills to credentials to degrees, and how do we work together to kind of fill that gap there and make it a continuous learning experience for people. I think that's going to be something we really, all need to lean in on, the employers and higher ed moving forward.
Great. We're just going to go straight through. Paul, any
Yeah, I think we're entering a phase where we will see higher ed's monopoly hold on what counts for learning end, and it's a good thing.
Really?
You're welcome to come visit our alien zoo anytime. I will go through with you, and we will have a blast in doing that. So I think, when I think about COVID and post-COVID, our president, President Crow, refers to this as an innovation moment. And it's not just an innovation moment because of COVID and the COVID response, but it's a time to innovate because of the injustice and inequities that have been amplified as a result of COVID. And that's just across education, across our entire society. And so really, we have to take that on. We have to take on an equity-first approach as we're moving forward in our education. I don't want to go back to pre-COVID. I want to go forward where everyone has access to education, high-quality education, and everyone can be successful and accomplish what they want to accomplish in their lives.
And I'll just get this in before I go to David. I also want in on the alien VR world.
Okay, we're going to set all of us. We're going to go. This is going to be fun. And anyone else,
Right.
just contact me.
I think the quality of teaching and learning, the quality of work and workforce, everything centers around relationships. And so I want to do an exercise here with everybody in the room. Think of somebody, a child, in your life that's important to you. And everyone's been part of a parent-teacher conference, either a student or parent, where the teacher talks at the parent and the parent assists nervously and then they leave and the discomfort is gone. Imagine if we ask you this question and that child in mind, what are 3 things that if I'm their teacher, I should know about that child to help them thrive in the classroom? What would you tell me about that child? Imagine if every parent conversation started that way with the teachers. Tell me 3 things about your child I should know to better serve them. Everything's about relationships, and one of the things I'm excited about our partnership, Paul, is your advisory model. I didn't know that you created that for your students. Everything's about relationships.
Are there any questions in the audience for the panelists?
Hi. I wondered how big a deal you see the dropout rate is for online learning and what you see as critical issues things that can be done to address this issue.
It's
So,
a big.
but
Oh, sorry, John.
That's all I think about, right? Is the students that we lose and what do we need to do differently? But I think you have to also understand what it is like for online students, right? So our students don't just come in, and Paul referenced this earlier, they don't come in and just plow through the way we typically think of a traditional education. So we have students that will come in, they'll take a course because they have the time and the access, but then they may not take a course for another 6 months, and then they'll come back. So how do you, what does dropout mean? Right? And so once again, we're really focused on what is the measure, how do you understand, and then how do you keep connection? How do you maintain that relationship with the student when they're not in a class for 6 months? And then how do you facilitate them coming back in to finish their education? And then how do you make that education more efficient? Right? I think, you know, right now, the campus-based education is really intentionally inefficient, right? Because the whole idea is to get students there for 4 years to have that traditional experience. That's not going to work for everyone. So this is what we spend a lot of our team thinking about. How are we going to do this? How do we build relationships? How do we maintain that community? How do we make education more efficient? And then how do we support individuals on the goals that they want to accomplish?
Any other questions?
Hi, I'm curious, you mentioned mobile. I'm curious not about mobile first, but about mobile as a potential modality. So, for example, if you're in a weekly cycle of asynchronous, maybe using mobile to get people engaged in small snippets earlier in the week, or even after the course is quote unquote over, how are retention snippets and even retention assessments to enhance that, or any other use cases you guys are thinking about for mobile in the new normal?
So it almost sounds like, I don't put words in your mouth, but a frame of like, aren't there ways we could integrate more mobile? It's like, no, it's mobile first now. I think like when we look at our learners, they're overwhelmingly on their device. It's not like, so we almost have to reverse, like what would we have to save for like a PC or a desktop? Because they're mostly not on it. And they're moving, they're at work, they're grabbing a half hour of study time in the break room or in the truck that's idling while they wait to unload at the loading dock. So I think we just have to build in a very native way that we're going to sort of deliver learning in that way. And we're probably going to deliver learning in smaller chunks, and it probably isn't going to look like the traditional LMSs, which feel very much about, creating an analog to the classroom. That's not the world they live in. So, like, triple down on the idea that we should be thinking about and we do a lot of work with refugee populations in Africa and the Middle East. There's no one on a desktop, it's only mobile. So it really does force you to think differently about how you think about content and delivery and connection and more.
Do you have a percentage of what your current customer base is?
Yeah, I was trying to think when you asked that question, and I'm not going to get this quite right, but I think the last time we looked, Travis, you're our Chief Product Officer. Do you have any insight on this one? The question is, what percentage of our students are learning on their mobile devices versus desktops, for example? I think it's like 60, 65% at this point.
It's almost 100%, it's just different times throughout the day.
Yeah, different times of the day. So everyone's on mobile some portion of the day, and I think primarily on mobile, it's close to 60 or more, 60% or more.
And faculty are there too.
Well, I'm getting the we're all done sign. Thank you all very much for coming. Really appreciate it. And thank you to all the panelists.